So, Dot and Bubble, the fifth episode of Doctor Who's 14th series, or season 1 of the Disney Plus era, it originally released on Disney Plus on the 31st of May 2024, and one day later on BBC One on the 1st of June 2024. Now, this was a story that I wanted to kind of circle back and review again, mainly because the first time I put up a review of it, I was just coming back from a holiday and I was suffering from a very bad cold. So yeah, the sound quality on that video wasn't particularly very good. And honestly, this is an interesting story for me to come back to. Because once the entirety of Series 14, or Season 1, was completed, and I did my ranking of it, there were only 2 episodes that I felt I really disliked from the previous season. Now, one of those was Space Babies, which was, for me, right down at the bottom. The other one was this one, Dot and Bubble, and from what I've seen, this episode seems to be particularly divisive among fans. There are fans who think this is one of the best episodes of Series 14. There are some who are really not keen on it. Where do I stand? Well, after rewatching it, I'm once again somewhere in the middle. Because, well, here's a quick recap of what happens in this particular episode. The episode focuses around, or is set around, a kind of fictional city known as Fine Time. The city of Fine Time, inside the city of Fine Time, all of the residents are between the ages of 17 to 27. And their job is mainly, they have kind of futuristic social media with a dot, a small kind of robot that kind of controls their social media, and a bubble that allows them to kind of fully immerse themselves in their social media, talk to their friends, and all of the rest of it. In the city of Fine Time, everyone only works for 2 hours a day, doing essentially data processing to send information back up to their homeworld above them. And the rest of the day they're free to do with what they choose, with most people spending a lot of their time inside their bubble talking to their friends via holograms. We focus mainly on a character named Lindy Pepper Bean, played by Callie Cook, and see her kind of going through her average day, with her talking to her friends, played by a whole host of actors, including some who I'm going to butcher the names of, I apologise, including ones played by Elida Lone, Aldous Sokajud Squire, Naomi Lynch, Billy Brayshaw, Millie Kent, and Eloise and Olivia Bennett. Now, early on in the episode, while brushing her teeth and listening to Itsy Bitsy Teeny Weeny Yellow Polka Dot Bikini, she is contacted through her bubble by the Doctor, played once again by Ncuti Gatwa, and she instantly blocks him because he isn't someone she recognises. Now later on in the day, when she's at her work trying to do data processing, she's contacted by the Doctor's companion, Ruby Sunday, played by Melanie Gibson, who tries to ask her more about Fine Time, and when she asks if Lindy can lower her bubble, Lindy is reluctant to do so, but eventually discovers that people outside are simply being eaten by giant slug-like creatures. To which, when the Doctor and Ruby end up contacting her, she informs them of this, and they have to try and find a way to get her out. And while trying to get out, she ends up meeting up with a local kind of popular music star, Ricky September, played by Tom Rhys-Harris, and their goal is to ultimately escape from Fine Time and get down to the plaza and find a way out of Fine Time itself. Fine Time is a city that is also surrounded by the Wild Woods, an area where they believe the slugs have come in from, only for the Doctor and co to realise that slugs haven't actually come from Fine Time, but have actually been manufactured by Fine Time itself. The social media that they use, the Dot and Bubble, it has eventually grown to hate this new society, and it's ultimately trying to destroy them, doing so in alphabetical order. Now, ultimately, this was supposed to be an episode. Rusty Davies, the writer of this episode, said it was supposed to be an episode focusing around social media and how it influences our view on society, racism, and elitism. Apparently, he did put this idea forward back when he first left Doctor Who. Like, he apparently tried putting it forward to showrunner at the time Stephen Moffat for a Series 6 story, but it wasn't picked up. Personally, I think that this works better as a 15th Doctor story with Ncuti Gatwa than it would have done with the 11th Doctor story with Matt Smith. No doubt they could have done it and they could have pulled it off and made it work, but there is the ending of it ultimately I do think works much better with Ncuti Gatwa. Because one of the big kind of sticking points to me and for a lot of other people as to why we grow to not like these characters. Because ultimately I'm going to have to jump to the end of the episode here, and if you haven't seen this episode, what's keeping you up, but also spoilers. Because we see Lindy, Pepper Bean and Ricky September trying to make their way down to the river to meet up with everybody else, all the other survivors, with Lindy briefly sacrificing Ricky, because when her own dot turns on her and tries to kill her, she knows that it's trying to kill her because she's next in the alphabet, and she reveals that Ricky changed his surname once he hit 50,000 followers, and his surname is actually Coombs, and C comes before P. So she ends up revealing this to the dot, which promptly kills Ricky September, allowing her to escape down to the river. And then we come to the kind of big point of this episode as to why it's divided so many people. Lindy makes her way down, meets up with some of the survivors, and also with the Doctor and Ruby. Now, the survivors say they're going to go out into the wild woods via the river and ultimately try and rebuild themselves and survive. The Doctor offers them an opportunity to come with him, citing that the TARDIS is bigger on the inside and he can get them all out of there and to safety. He can find them a new world. To which the survivors then turn him down. And when he asks why and pleads with them to reconsider, they say it simply to him that you're not like us. Like, interacting with you through a screen, that's just about acceptable, but in the real world, no. And apparently this was the point of the episode for Russ T Davies, because I remember he said in his descriptions of it that once you get to the end, you realise that all of the residents of Fine Time, they're young, they're privileged, and they're white. You realise not a single different nationality, which suddenly puts a whole kind of racism viewpoint on this episode, to which is one of the reasons why I think this works much better now with Ncuti Gatwa than it would have done with Matt Smith. I mean, Matt Smith would have probably made it work, but while I think they would have made it work with social media, society, and elitism as the viewpoints, with Ncuti Gatwa being the first Doctor of colour, first actor of colour to play the Doctor, well, apart from Joe Martin, obviously, but just having a Doctor of colour face these issues, I do think it works a lot better. I mean, I think I'd said in my previous kind of big review of this that I feel like with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor facing sexism in the likes of the Witchfinders, you know, people not taking her seriously because she's a woman and the kind of historical views of the time, I feel like Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor did have to face a moment of racism at some point. And ultimately with this episode, it's done very powerful here. And it's also quite unusual to think that this was... I don't know if Ncuti Gatwa, if this was his kind of very first episode. I don't know if he'd already filmed the stuff for The Giggle or The Church on Ruby Road. But apparently, for Series 14 at least, this was the first episode that Ncuti Gatwa actually filmed. But it wasn't the first episode filmed. That was, I believe, 73 Yards. But this was the first one that Ncuti Gatwa was around for. And dang, that final scene where he's pleading with everybody to reconsider and they just don't. It's heartbreaking to think about. Apparently people have considered this like an allusion to the show Black Mirror, which I personally have not seen, but I can understand their viewpoints of it. The big reason as to why I dislike this episode is whether my hatred of the characters come the end ultimately brings it down. this is one where I think I do have to kind of think about it, because I've seen quite a lot of people regard this as one of the better episodes of Series 14, and if I really think hard about it, then yeah, I can see their viewpoint. I guess kind of the issue for me, why I put it so low, is that because of my dislike of the characters by the end. But if I compare it to another episode that's on my list, right, this came in at number 6, just above Space Babies, and just below episode 2, The Devil's Cord. Now, if I compare Dot and Bubble to The Devil's Cord and look at it from an objective viewpoint, Dot and Bubble is probably the better episode. It's got some heavier themes, it's got some really good acting, it's got some really good casting, and a very tense kind of atmosphere. However, if I was to go from a subjective viewpoint, which episode I could personally prefer more, I'd probably go for The Devil's Court. Like, that one is kind of a lot more fun, a lot more kind of funny, but it's difficult. Like, just I'm still not entirely sure on my points of view on this particular story, because as I said, if I look at it from an objective viewpoint, this is the better story. However, if I garner which episode I gather more enjoyment from, others kind of top this particular story. But then I do see why people regard it in such high regard. Like, it is one of those stories that does make you think, that does ultimately cause you to re-examine your viewpoints and think about how social media has influenced us as a society. And it's interesting to think about. So, I've been rewatching this entire season, while I didn't really need to make kind of new reviews on any of the rest of them, because my viewpoint hasn't really changed, Dot and Bubble was one I felt I really had to kind of re-examine my view on. Both to give you a clearer viewpoint on how I feel about it, but also to give you a clearer review due to the fact last time I was suffering with a very bad cold. But there you go. Let me personally know what your thoughts are on this particular episode. Do you like it? Do you enjoy it? Is it one where you're a bit hesitant about it, as I am? But let me know down below in the comments what you think of this particular story. Anyway, I can't say what I'm going to review next, as I have no idea at this point, but when I get there, I'll let you know. Anyway, until next time, see ya.